Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning into my talk. My name's John Egan. I'm the CEO and co-founder here at Kintaba. We're an incident management and response platform that helps companies become more resilient across their entire organizations by implementing incident management best practices. So before this company, I worked at Facebook, both on the internal tools teams as well as building external enterprise products, including helping to co-found the workplace product, which is Facebook's enterprise offering. But today, I want to talk to you more directly about incidents. And specifically, I want to talk about incident metrics that matter and those that don't. So over the last year of running Kintaba, we've made a lot of interesting discoveries about how organizations currently tend to think about incidents and how they measure them. And I imagine many people in this audience are building dashboards or have dashboards or are thinking about dashboards that have to do with their incidents as they set up or maintain an incident management system and team. So let's dive right in. Obviously, everyone loves metrics. We all have dashboards. They give us quantification of the things we're trying to do as a team to prove that we're being successful, especially as an incident management team and response team, in our ability to maintain site reliability. And I think what happens because of this is that we start to think a lot about the obvious things we can measure, especially when it comes to incidents and when it comes to fires. And I think when we think about these spaces specifically, the most natural thing for us to do is to think a lot about how are we making these incidents stop in the moment. We just want them to end. When incidents are running, all that anyone's ever asking is, when's this going to be over? Is this going to be over soon? So it becomes pretty natural to look at those statements and try to convert them into numbers. And when we talk to our management chain or we talk to the rest of the organization, it's natural for us to come back and kind of spit out what I call the MTT stars, right? All of your mean times, because these are the easiest ways to go and break up an incident response. And what are these? These are MTTR. This is your mean time to repair, your mean time to detection, your mean time to mitigation, your mean time to recovery, which is your other MTTR, or maybe the other MTTR, which is your mean time to resolution. These are really sort of the standard metrics that we see people talking a lot about. And straight out of the gate, I'm going to say that there are two really big problems with this set of metrics being the way that you're measuring your incident teams. Number one is that if you're practicing incident management correctly, then the average response time, or really the average anything, is going to be a pretty poor measure when what you really ought to be working with in the major incident management space is black swan events. These things can't be compared against each other generally in a way where an average is meaningful. If you have a 1 minute incident at the beginning of the month and then a 5-day incident, yes, you can have multiple day incidents at the end of the month, your average is pretty unrepresentative of either of them and doesn't really inform much about how you need to act. And that sort of leads me into number two, which is despite the fact that we want to measure something like response time, because if we don't measure it, we think we can't improve it. That's countered pretty aggressively, especially in a human reporting world, which is what most incident management is, where by setting those measurements as targets, they're very easy to abuse as reporters and responders. In fact, you think pretty immediately as a responder about, should I file this incident now, or should I wait to make sure that my MTTR looks a little bit better? Maybe I should be a little bit more sure that I know how I'm going to solve this problem before I file it, for example. This is really the opposite of what we want. You'll hear more about that as we go on and talk about more effective metrics. But really, like at the end of the day, these are vanity metrics. They're gameable. They're not particularly meaningful across incidents, and they're pretty easy to throw up on a board and claim that you're making the organization better, when in reality you're not actually measuring resiliency. And so the way we kind of come at this problem to think about how might we actually go about finding decent metrics is to back up a little bit and say, what is the goal of putting metrics against incident management in the first place? And if we really think about our goals directly, we might realize that those goals are more about producing resiliency, not just recovery. Our goal is to make each outage an opportunity to prevent future outages, not just get out of the outage as it's happening. There's an art form called kintsugi, which is the namesake of our company, Kintaba. And it really reminds us that our goal here is to make solutions that are permanent and make our organization stronger, not solutions that just solve the problem for now. So how do we do that? These are kind of easy statements to make, to say, don't just measure your MTT stars. The answer is look at organizations that we know are resilient and then work backwards to see what they do so well. And the easiest example is the airline industry. So this is an industry that for the last 12 years has carried around 8 billion passengers without a single fatal crash. And this industry really is the crucible of where modern incident management grew. And if we look carefully at that industry and how it's produced repetitive success in terms of providing a safety culture that everyone trusts, really. It's well known that airline travel is the safest form of travel. What we find is that the primary changes that happened coming out of a series of crashes, I think in the 80s and 90s, was a consolidated effort within the industry to actually increase overall reporting of incidents and to make those incidents more available to others within the industry. And so this is a pretty big deal to say that what we're really trying to do here isn't just to make pilots better at reacting to critical situations, but by increasing the reporting of incidents across the board at various levels of moderately critical all the way through to extremely critical, will actually reduce those critical incidents as a whole. So what do we need? We need more incidents, right? And this starts to get us towards the metrics that we might think more about in terms of what we should be tracking. Some metrics that we really care about, probably, if we think about things in terms of how the airline industry thinks about things, might include things like increasing the count of overall incidents that are reported within the organization at any given time. And this probably means lowering the barrier to filing an incident, and also probably lowering the barrier of what you call an incident. It's very easy inside of a company to say, this is a SEV 1, this is the site down, this is our revenue dropping to zero. It's very hard to say, well, this was a near miss, or this is something that went badly but no one saw, and recognizing that it's just as important to file those to get our overall incident count up, because by invoking the process of incident management, especially modern incident management, more often, what we'll also do is we'll create more postmortems, and we'll write more postmortems, even if they're short. And postmortems are where we capture knowledge. So our percentage of completed postmortems goes up alongside our count of number of incidents reported. And then our knowledge actually increases within the organization. And the final piece there becomes then the readership of those postmortems. So how well are you distributing, and that information is being absorbed? And the theory that we can draw from the airline industry pretty directly is to say, if you do that, if you increase the number of incidents being reported, because you're having more internally than you realize, and you increase the percentage of postmortems being written, so the capture of that knowledge, and then you increase the readership of those postmortems, which is your distribution of knowledge, then what you'll get is you'll get a decrease in the count of major outages, which is really what we care about when it comes to customer impacting incident management. And so we should probably end up with a chart that looks something like this, where we've got a blue line here of cumulative incidents recorded increasing and your SEV1 major outages dropping. And this is really the chart that I think all organizations should be striving towards, is some version of showing this inverse relationship to prove out that the machine of incident management is working, not just the panicked response to incidents that are happening, being effective at getting the site back up. So a lot of people kind of come to us and ask after that, well, how am I supposed to sell a chart that goes up, to an operations team? These guys are looking to make things better, make things more efficient. The airline industry is great, but maybe it's not powerful enough as an example. So, we like to point in those cases towards the more exciting aviation industry, the space industry, which is pretty fascinating because they've taken the airline industry's learnings and really just put a order of magnitude increase on it in terms of how it influences their day-to-day operations. So NASA is my favorite example of this. NASA actually needs incidents so desperately that they'll go outside of the organization. They'll find incidents happening in other industries, and then they'll write their own postmortem internally, and they'll almost claim this as their own incident so that they can get their numbers up and they can increase their knowledge and learning. They actually run a site public on the web that shows all of the incidents they've collected from around industry. This is an example of a pedestrian bridge that collapsed in Miami, where NASA took learnings from this and actually applied them back to upcoming space missions for how they can think about understanding failure from previous situations and not designing outside of proven engineering principles. And then they go one step further, where they feed their own incidents back into the public space so that everyone else in their industry, as well as others, can also learn. And so not only do they publish internally aggressively, and NASA also maintains a large internal database of incidents that I imagine exceeds this public one, but on the public side, we're looking at thousands of records of information. And within this includes incidents around failures of incident knowledge to propagate across the organization. So I think this is just a fantastic example where we can see that metric requirement of what we really want inside of our companies to become resilient is we want to, at a top level, not worry quite so much about the breakdown of the response, but really focus on how many of these things are we capturing, how many of these things are we learning from, and then how effective are we being at applying that knowledge such that we don't have major outages in our company at all as far as customers are concerned. And I think that that's the goal that a resiliency team should have. And I think that that's a goal that the entire organization can adopt when it comes to looking at resiliency orgs or product teams that are practicing resiliency or resilience engineering practices. And that's really where I think metrics around incident management become most impactful and most valuable for any company out there of any size, 5 people, 10 people, or multiple thousands of people. So in conclusion, even if you're not putting this guy on the moon, I think we can all adopt a simpler set of metrics that have more impactful outcomes through these types of metrics, as opposed to holding ourselves to the fire for averages across response times that maybe aren't things that we can or need to worry quite so much about getting perfect. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to my talk. I hope this has been helpful and enlightening. If you have any questions about this talk or otherwise, feel free to reach out to me. I'm john@kintaba.com, and certainly come and check out Kintaba if you get a chance. Thanks so much.